Welcome back to How I Franchise This, the show where we dive into the real stories behind franchise empires, told directly by the people who built them. Today's guest is Adam Contos, former CEO of Remax, a Marine Corps veteran, a SWAT commander turned business builder, and now the co-founder of Area 15 Ventures. From undercover narcotics work to leading one of the world's largest real estate franchises, Adam's journey is anything but typical, but what ties it all together? Systems, leadership, and a relentless drive to grow businesses and the people behind them. In this episode, we talk about what it means to narc market, yes, really, why franchising is the ultimate community builder, the biggest mindset shifts new franchisees must make, and how Adam is betting on the next generation of operators with no outside capital, no rigid mandates, just purpose and passion. If you're someone thinking about owning a business, scaling one, or just obsessed with how leaders think, this episode's for you. Let's jump in. Adam, I'm really excited to have you on the show with us today. Truly an incredible background and story throughout franchising, but also other dozens of industries and businesses. Why don't we start with getting the quick Adam story, the 5-minute background, and why don't you share with the audience what you've been working on and what you've been up to?
Awesome. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. It's an honor to be here, and you and I spent some time the other day over some coffee, just kind of catching up face to face. And it was great to see you then. A little bit about myself. So day after I graduated high school, I joined the Marines, went to boot camp. Everybody else was talking about going to parties. I was talking about going and standing on yellow footprints and getting yelled at and doing push-ups. So I learned systems early on in life. My dad was a government worker, very systems oriented, and also very high in work ethic and honesty. Yeah, so he worked in law enforcement. Always wanted to be a cop because of that. So joined the Marines, came back, tried college a little bit while I was in the Marine Reserves, and didn't really like college. I'm a 2-time college dropout, probably like a lot of the entrepreneurs that you know. And it was kind of how it paved my life. I got into law enforcement. Started as a cop in the early 90s, got into a very fast growing agency. So learned a lot about all the different types of calls you get on the street. And I've seen quite a few things. Worked undercover a couple of years where I learned sales. So the DEA undercover narcotics school would drop you on a street corner and say, go find somebody and buy drugs from them. And we would go do that. That's how you learn sales. I called it narc marketing. So you had to meet unknown people, overcome their fears and challenges, and close a deal with them. So did that. Kept growing up in law enforcement. Narketing. There you go. I love that. That's catchy. So I ended up being a SWAT commander, which is problem solving in chaos. What a lot of business people deal with. So between sales and problem solving and chaos, I think I had a lot of franchising going on in my head already. And then started a couple companies while I was a cop, Homeland Security company. So doing security consulting, threat assessments, kind of counterterrorism training, things like that. And then got into the real estate space, teaching real estate agents how not to get hurt and killed doing their job. As a customer of my security consulting firm. That led me to franchising. And I met the co-founder of Remax, Dave Liniger, who also became my business mentor. He was helping me grow my businesses. And one day he said, why don't you come work for Remax? I said, well, I don't know anything about real estate. He goes, you don't have to know about real estate. You have to know about franchising and sales and marketing to help these people do more business. And you will learn about real estate. I said, perfect. So jumped into the franchising space by being a franchise business consultant, or we call them franchise development consultants at Remax, and then worked my way up through the company. Ended up sitting in front of the board of directors, and they said, well, we'd like to have you in the C-suite, but we're a public company now, and you don't have a college degree, so you need to go get your MBA. So I went and got my MBA at University of Denver, Daniels College of Business. And then after I graduated, I was running the franchise development department or franchise sales at that point. I took over several other parts of the organization, became chief operating officer, co-CEO, then CEO. Did that for a few years and then exited the company to go build my own businesses with my mentor then, the co-founder of the company, Dave Liniger. So we started Area 15 Ventures and have been investing in franchising and growing leaders in franchising ever since.
Heck of a background, heck of a story, and I'm excited to dig in more to certain pieces. I think there's a lot that people can learn from from that experience. When you first got exposure, you first meet Dave, and you knew nothing about franchising. Were there any red flags or things that led to hesitation for you, where you're like, I don't know about this. I've got my training thing, my security background, the businesses that I've started up. Was there ever a moment in time where you said, no way, I'm not doing that? Or was it immediately like, I gotta, learn from this guy and be a part of what he's doing and get on the rocket ship?
I think it was quickly I understood that Dave was legit. He was the real deal in business. And he had been, he would come out and ride with me in law enforcement. So he would watch me do my job as a leader on the SWAT team and at the department. And we just had talked so much before that I instantly trusted and believed in what he had told me when he said, hey, you should come try out this franchising thing in the real estate space. And I thought, I really like where your head's at. That means I have to quit the funnest job in law enforcement, being a SWAT commander, and quit my consulting firm, and I'm making really good money. He goes, yeah, but you have so much more potential. And I thought, well, I can always go back and do those things. So I'm going to take the plunge here and go dedicate myself to franchising at Remax and the franchisees and the customers there, the agents and the consumer, and see what I can do. So, of course, my dad was like, why are you doing that? Because he had a secure job of 30 some years in law enforcement. He's like, this is a great career. I go, yeah, it is, but I can always go back and do it again. Mm-hmm. So, I had a parachute. I knew I could go start my security consulting firm back up. I could get back into law enforcement relatively easily. I didn't cut ties with the agency. I'm still a volunteer there today, even 25 years later. But ultimately there was a slight hesitation. Yes. But that was quickly overcome with the confidence that I saw in the leadership that Dave had and the organization that he had built.
And where, at your point, at this point in your career, how old are you? What other kind of like personal risk are you maybe taking? Like, was there family or friends or other relationships that you were maybe that were top of mind for you as you made this decision?
Yeah, I mean, it was not the greatest part of my life. I was getting divorced from my first wife, and I had like a 2-year-old. So, could I have stayed and been secure in what I was doing? Yeah. But was it the time to make changes? Absolutely. I mean, when chaos is going on in your life, that's when it's best to just throw a little bit more on the fire, in my opinion. So I, all of those things happened at once. I got going again in my next life at Remax, and I fell in love with the business model of being a business that builds businesses. I loved helping people grow their business, and that's how I truly fell in love with the franchise model, that type of business structure.
There's a couple of things that I think I can relate a lot to, and I think would be helpful for those listening, is that there's never a great time to start, but knowing that whatever it is you're doing in that moment, you can probably go back to, is such a safety net that I think people discount and just don't consider. I think they think, oh, if I leave Bank of America or this corporate job, they're never going to have me back because I'm this rascal or this misfit that went to go start something and I failed at it. And I think the reality is you at one point did it before and you probably had less experience then doing it. You leaving to go start your own thing is only going to make you a better person, a better operator. A lot of companies would be lucky to have you back. And I don't think people think about it that way. And it's awesome to know that in this moment, you just knew that. You knew that I can always go start my security business back up, my consulting business back up. And same with, the kind of chaos in your life too at the time. It's just like there's never a great time. It's like, I know it's cliche, but the whole Nike saying of just do it is so true. It's, you got to start, and I think if you do that, you're probably already ahead of 95% of people out there if you just take the jump and go for it.
Totally agree. Yeah, and frankly, the reality is if you don't think you can go back, you shouldn't have been there to begin with. So, I mean, that if you're going to leave an organization, they should be asking you not to leave because you're doing such a good job for them. And they're like, if you ever decide that's not for you, we will welcome you back with open arms. That's the way it should be. If you are a good performer, you have good work ethic, and you've done everything you possibly can for your employer before you leave. And frankly, this is why a lot of people either do or don't get into franchising, because they come from the corporate world. Well, sometimes your franchise relationship doesn't quite work out, but that other one should still be nurtured and cherished, where they keep calling you going, can you come back now? Please, will you come back? We miss you so much.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when I left Ernst & Young, I was a year and a half out of college. So I'm 20, I don't know, 24 at the time. And I remember I had to do exit interviews with some of these partners. And these are guys that are probably making seven figures. And I had to go tell them, I'm going to leave a Big Four consulting job to start a laundry business. And I was like, they're going to make fun of me, or they're going to judge me. And I remember all of them being incredibly supportive and saying what you just said. They're like, Alex, if it ever doesn't work out, like, we'll take you back in a heartbeat. Like, you understand, how business works. You think a little bit differently. Your work ethic is great. Like, you just have, it, and we want you to go do this, because if you don't, it's always going to be back of your mind. You're never going to be fully focused at whatever it is you're doing if this other opportunity is just always floating out there, and you should go do it. And I'll never forget one of the partners, probably the one I was most intimidated to talk to. He ended up telling me the story of, look, Alex, I'm here. I've been at EY for probably 20 to 25 years. And he's like, I've climbed the ladder. I've done really well for myself, and, financially I'm very successful. But he's like, I always had this idea of going to go start my own practice when I was in my mid 20s, late 20s, and I never did it. And he's in his, late 40s, early 50s now. And talking to him, he's like, there's not a day or a week that goes by that I don't think about that. And this guy, who is, I think, now the leader of all of financial services of North America for EY, started shedding a bit of a tear. His eyes started getting watery. And he's like, this is my biggest regret in life. And in this conversation with you right now, I see myself, and you have to go do this. And I'll never forget that. And so appreciate you sharing too that story of how you think through making these decisions. And I like the attitude of, they should be, begging you to come back, especially if you have that right attitude and that right work ethic and mindset. One question I have for you is, so you have this awesome, run with Remax, and you learn a ton, and you build this huge business, and you guys are wildly successful. What made you, after leaving, this global leadership role, say, I'm coming back for more with Area 15 Ventures, and you guys, double down and start up a whole other business?
I think more than anything, we just love franchising. We love helping people find a new way to, enrich themselves. And franchising is a great way to do that. It's a brand with a business model, and then you add entrepreneurs and you coach them through this. It's fun and fulfilling. So, that's one of the things that Dave Liniger instilled in me, is create an environment where people can be as successful as they want to be, and then help them every way you can to get there. And some will make it, some will not make it, but it's kind of on them whether or not they put the grit and the sweat equity and things like that into it in order to make it. We've seen, and I heard this talked about the other day. I put out a LinkedIn post about this. You can take a great operator and put them in a really bad market, and they will be successful. But you can take a really bad operator and put them in a great market, and they're not going to be successful because they're still a bad operator. So
find a way to mess it up.
Oh yeah, totally. There are some people that can just find a way to wreck a rock, for crying out loud. And that happens. But, we choose the best that we can, and then we put a little bit or a lot of the onus on them, and then coach them through it. Some will make it, some won't. But the reality is, those that make it, that's really fulfilling. And when you see that, and the chances are that they're going to make it better than trying it on their own, since they have a system and a brand to follow.
So is there some element, so I hear you say, like, you guys love the franchise space, but for you as individuals, is there some element of, I don't know if paying it forward is the right thing, but it's, hey, we want to bet on the next group because at some point people bet on us? Or what's the personal reason and drive that gets you guys coming back and doing it all over again? Because with the success you've had, you could probably go hunt and fish and ride four-wheelers every day for the rest of your life if you wanted to. What is it that makes you keep getting up every day and putting in the work on this next venture?
I would say purpose. It's almost like a patriotic view of capitalism. And you're so in love with the concept of watching businesses grow that's what continues to drive you there. I mean, you're right. I retired. I could be retired right now and go fishing and things like that. But you know what? I did that this last weekend. And I want to be here helping people grow their businesses, learn something more, enrich themselves, create family wealth for their families and their kids and their kids' kids and things like that, and learn what they can possibly do. A lot of people feel stuck because they're in the grind of a job. Well, that's kind of that entrepreneurial draw of, I did that and now I feel stuck doing that. So why not try something else? And, we don't want people doing side jobs or semi-absentee ownership in franchising. It doesn't seem like it's the most healthy thing when you're just sort of paying attention to something. It's like sort of paying attention to a diet and hoping to get into shape. It's not going to work. But if you go all in on something and you let other people see that desire to be the best that you can be, chances are people are going to step up to help you. And that's what we like doing, is stepping up to help people to find their entrepreneurial potential. It's fulfilling.
Yeah, I think once you get a taste for it too, it's probably one of the most addicting things out there. It's
Totally.
I've realized after getting into entrepreneurship and building businesses that how grateful I think I should be, because I don't think many people ever find that in life, and if not for decades or years after they start their career. And so I'm with you fully. I mean, that's part of what we're doing at Franzi too, is just like, how do you enable someone to get comfortable and find the right fit and find the right business and take that bet on themselves, in a thoughtful, meaningful way, especially if they've got that, I don't know, that it factor again, the work ethic, the willingness to go be curious and jump in and figure things out. It's one of the most rewarding, fulfilling things I've ever felt. And I figured that's what was driving you guys, because it's, again, once you taste it, it's addicting. You're never going to stop doing it. You're probably going to be 80 doing this stuff.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it is a drug, and I mean, it's a healthy drug, I think. So it's fun though. They say that people without purpose die young. So this is my purpose, is growing leaders and growing entrepreneurs. That feels good to me. And I think that's good for society. It's good for the economy. It's good for families. It lets you know that you can do things by yourself, obviously with other people's help, but, and fulfill that need for showing or proving yourself to society of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, Mark Cuban has this quote that I love. It's like, the best thing you can do to contribute to society is build a big effing company. Because if you do that, you're going to serve all these customers, you're going to create all these jobs, and you're likely going to generate profits, returns to investors, but you're also going to pay a huge tax bill. And hopefully the government, your local, state, city, federal tax, goes towards something of positivity and goodness. And even if it doesn't, you as a capitalist or you as an entrepreneur still created all those jobs and all that impact. And I just love that line. The single most impactful thing you can do to society is build a big effing company. And I love that. What is it about franchising, that excites you guys the most? I mean, you could double down on all sorts of things. It could be real estate entrepreneurs. It could be independent business owners. What is it right now about franchising, the current state of franchising, that gets you the most excited?
I think the current state of franchising is the generational desire to be part of it. So I'm a Gen Xer. I'm 53 years old, and it wasn't cool to be an entrepreneur when I was growing up. It was kind of taboo. People were like, "Oh, you're an entrepreneur. Oh, you can't work for somebody else." That type of thing. And that was put in your head. You had to be part of, going after the big company. Everybody's parents wanted to work for IBM or Xerox or, Ford or whatever it was. And it's great. I love the fact that people work for those big organizations. But I think understanding how you can be part of the community, which entrepreneurship and small business makes up probably 3/4 of the community. You have large metropolitans that people work for the government or major organizations there or something like that. But realistically, once you get outside of that, it's entrepreneurs and small business. So ultimately, it's a draw overall to be part of the community. I think entrepreneurship realistically and small business realistically, the fabric of franchising is what draws us to that. It doesn't matter if it's real estate, if it's QSR, if it's home services, anything like that. I think fundamentally just being part of the community, because franchising is the community, in my opinion. Try driving down the street and not seeing a franchise. You're going to. That's the reality. In fact, you'll probably see a handful of them just driving a block through any major metropolitan area or a suburb someplace. But, of course, ultimately it comes down to, I just like systems with brands tied together. It builds trust. It gives people something to do. It makes money for the community. Like you said, it's a payback to the community. And we look at our kids. They grow up working at franchises. Nearly every kid has worked at a franchise in high school or in college. And it's a good way to educate people on how business works, entrepreneurship, systems and processes, responsibility, helping the customer, greeting people face to face and understanding what they're about. I mean, it pays back every which way.
Is there anything in franchising right now, any trends that you're seeing that you think are good for franchising as a business model? And then are there trends that you see that might be concerning you at all as it relates to, again, franchising as a business model?
I think we always talk about, the cliche statement right now is responsible franchising, which basically means, do good and do a good job at it. So, a lot of people look at it and go, don't try and grow too fast. Well, grow fast enough where you can service what you're growing. But ultimately, some of the onus lands on the people who buy the franchises. Are they going to get it open? Are they going to run it properly? Things like that. The more we grow, the more we're going to see cracks in the armor of franchising. But it's our job as franchisors and investors in the space to say, all right, that didn't work. Let's fix it and make it work better next time, and not try and, sell snake oil to somebody and say, this is going to work great for you. No, you got to make it work, for crying out loud, people. I mean, it's, if you buy a franchise, you're taking on the responsibility of running that business and making it work. Me as a franchisor, my job is to service you as it says in the franchise agreement. So I think that's kind of that double-edged sword of what do I like, what do I not like? Fast growth is going to cause some failure. It's going to happen. Slow growth is going to cause less failure, but the reality is you're going to have less growth. So it's a little bit of a risk-reward trade-off. What I really like about what's going on right now is, I guess you could say the safety nets are even better than they have been before. But also you have reckless operators, and there's only so much you can do to prevent reckless operators, such as, employing enough accountability and coaching, things of that nature, but they're still going to do what they want to do. They're going to, and it comes down to this operator entrepreneur mindset. Operators are great at running a system and adapting within. Entrepreneurs want to adapt the system. So, we want more operators than entrepreneurs to an extent. But maybe we want the mindset of both within that human being that we're selling a franchise to or a territory. So there's good, there's opportunity, but there's bad. There's a lot of opportunity. So I guess you could say the opportunity is both the good and the bad here. It's going to come down to what are the results that the franchisee creates with the assistance of the franchisor. But at the same time, franchisors, make sure you're laying it out for your franchisees, saying this is going to be hard. Franchisees, it's on you to do enough diligence and understand, you're putting this much weight on the bar. Can you lift it? Mm-hmm. Are you overextending yourself? Don't blame it on the franchisor if you're overextending yourself and you didn't do your diligence to say, I'm willing to put in 16, 18 hours a day for the first 6 to 12 months on this thing to get it moving. So, we're not selling cash machines in franchising. We're selling businesses that need to be started and run by responsible owners who want to be operating in the business. So good and bad, I think it'll catch up with itself at some point. The good catching up with the bad catching up with the good, and we'll find an equilibrium. But we are in a growth mode in franchising right now. It's growing really, really well. As you know, at Franzi, I mean, it's fantastic for you guys. And it's also, you guys are a fantastic place for people to check out these different franchise brands, but the people need to also reflect and say, am I willing to put in the work?
Yep. The onus is always, I think, on you as the operator, as the person making the decision. I do think it's like any other relationship, good expectation setting has to be there. And to your point, there can't be snake oil salesmen saying like, "Oh, you're going to be a bajillionaire and make all these, empty promises," because yes, as much responsibility that's on the individual to verify that, there is, some gaps and lack of reporting and regulation. And so I think like any good relationship, the expectation setting has to be there. And I think franchising is continuing to evolve and have more of that transparency and kind of expectation setting on both ends, both from the franchisee and the franchisor. You also mentioned, the sea of opportunities. It's part of the good and the bad right now. And I'd be curious for, your hat for Area 15. How do you think about finding, the next great brand? And is there anything that separates an emerging, promising young brand from one that doesn't, that won't scale or you don't think will scale? I'd be curious how you, pick the right team or the right concept or think about that.
We have a multitude of different businesses. So we're a family office as well as an investment group. We don't take any outside money though. So I guess you could just say we're probably just a family office, single family office, multifamily office type situation. But ultimately, when we take a look at this, and by the way, in franchising, we have a startup, Daddy's Chicken Shack. It's an emerging brand. It's very young. It's going through growing pains that any emerging brand comes up with. Oh, how do we get this profitable? How do we, adjust the system to be best for the franchisees and the brand itself and the consumer, things like that. We picked that one because the chef founders, just fantastic people. They did a heck of a job putting together a great concept that tested itself in a very niche marketplace and did pretty well there. Now, turning it into a replicable model and spreading it around the U.S., you see the highs and the lows. We'll find problems, we'll retool things, we'll make adjustments, and you kind of do that quite a bit in an emerging brand. We also have a 53-year-old brand, Port of Subs, a sandwich company that we acquired a couple of years ago. You look at that, rock solid systems and training. It's been tried in so many different ways and places that that thing is going to be solid and strong. How did we find these? Just talking to people in the marketplace. Why did we pick them? First of all, we picked Daddy's Chicken Shack because of the people and the product and the concept. We love the brand. We love the people behind it. The food tastes great. I'm not a fried food person overall, but I was like, wow, this is good. And Port of Subs, again, great product. We loved it, but the systems were rock solid and the franchisees were just incredible. So, we did diligence in a couple different ways, but ultimately it comes down to what's your gut tell you about this brand? And you're going to make mistakes. A lot of people make investments in 10 different brands hoping to hit on one or two. But ultimately, we're doing it because we love what we're doing and we love franchising. And we like the multitude of challenges that are presented by either a super young brand or a relatively mature brand. Mature brand, you're like, oh, how do we scale this? Young brand, how do we make this scalable? So, it's two different challenges, two different ways of looking at it. I'm way more on the Port of Sub side because I love franchise sales. That's kind of my thing, Fran Dev. And then we've got some other people here on the Daddy side.
Yeah, more operationally focused, like playbook building
Yep.
focused.
Yeah.
How many deals a year do you think you look at, or do you guys have a investment, mandate around we need to make this many investments a year? Or is it more just because it's a single, family or multifamily office, you guys are going at your own pace and opportunistic about things as they come up?
It's B. So we don't want to feel like we're under any sort of internal mandate when it comes to that. We want to do what feels right and what we like. Are we out searching for anything right now? No, we're not. If the right thing pops up, would we take a look at it? Yeah, probably. But we also have, other companies that we run. So, it has to fit right into what we're doing, what we're looking at. We've got, I would say, we've got some food. So I'm happy with that. I'm not out looking for other food concepts. But if the right servicing concept or asset light concept or something like that comes forward, would I take a look at it? Yeah, I might consider it. But I can tell you we're not actively out there going, all right, we have a fund we have to deploy. So it's our
That's
money.
pretty nice.
Yeah, it totally is. So we don't have an investment mandate at all. So because we don't have investors, it's us going, we're doing this because we want to do it on our terms, which is the definition of success, doing what you want to do, when you want to do it, with who you want to do it, with how you want to do it, where you want to do it, things like that. So our mandate is a definition of success. So if it fits within that, we will take a look at it.
I bet that approach too, I mean, it just allows for honestly probably having a lot more fun doing it too. I know you're in this to build good businesses and to, you know, provide those economic opportunities, coaching, mentorship, et cetera, that we talked about previously. But at the same time, when it isn't, some $100 million endowment behind you that's, looking for some specific return, I bet you and Dave probably have a lot of fun, doing this together and looking through things. And what a cool stage to be in, and an opportunity to get to look at companies like that.
Totally. You said something that Dave says a lot, and that is, this is supposed to be fun. So when something gets challenging, you got to look at it and go, this is supposed to be fun. How do we make it fun? And that's kind of how we view the world that we live in, is how do we make it fun?
Yeah, I love that. When you, so I guess the current portfolio today, when you get involved in a brand, let's say Port of Subs, I mean, what does the day-to-day look like for you guys? Is it, a mixture of you guys looking at new deals? Is it very hands-on with each of the brands? Is it, time for, I don't know, call it philanthropic things, or, things that you guys just enjoy doing, your webinars and your coaching and educational, kind of efforts? What does the day-to-day look like for you guys on a random week? Like, what does this week look like for you?
This week I have a webinar coming up this week. You and I talked about that. So talking about the 3 profit levers of franchising. And if anybody's listening to this, go back and take a look at Your Franchise Group, which is a kind of a networking group for franchisees and franchisors, if you're interested in that concept. But, my goal is to scale education, and that scaled education should have to do with either leadership in the franchise brands or systems and operations in the franchise brands. So we're either maximizing those systems and operations by clarifying what's going on within that brand. And that's what like the 3 profit levers are. Do your systems and does your data prove out that you are doing the things that create profit in your organization? If they don't, take a look at these 3 profit levers. Is your leadership living this way within the organization? That's the culture and the values of the organization. And are those things driving the systems to be done properly? So it's either the systems or the leadership. And that's really what I focus on from day to day, one or the other. If I see a gap in one of them, or I see an opportunity in one of them, I'm going to go after that. And I'm going to talk about that on videos, on podcasts, and in instructions, webinars, whatever it might be, in order to show that this is how we do it. Because people don't want to be told what to do. They want to see their leader doing what they need to be doing. And that activates the mirror neurons in our brains, and we will go mimic what our leaders do. So the leaders, you have to meet them where they're at, meet these people where they're at, have a good message to market match for these people, and do the things that you want them to be doing. If that means talking about leadership every day because they have weak following and teamwork within their organization, you need to do that. If that means understanding how the data is employed, where the gaps exist in that, how the systems are breaking down within their organization, you need to focus on that, tell stories around that, demonstrate that through training or through operations, show up in a store and talk about it, something of that nature. But ultimately, does it have to do with systems or does it have to do with leadership? Those are the things that we spend most of the time during the weeks on.
And is that with your brands as well? Like, you're going in and giving them this like hands-on kind of tactical feedback and advice?
Yeah. So
go ahead.
I'm sorry. A lot of times we'll test these in small groups. So I tested these with some of our key leaders not long ago, and they're like, oh my, I've been in multi-brand franchising for a long time, and I really like that concept. I didn't look at it that way. And a lot of times what you're doing, you're not reinventing the wheel. You're just creating clarity about the now and the what. And as you create the clarity with what's going on right now and what do I need to be doing, You test it with a few, and then you scale it with all the rest.
Are there any, is there one piece of advice that you find yourself giving over and over again? Whether it's your portfolio companies or just other folks that you meet along this journey, is there like one or two pieces of advice that you find yourself constantly sharing?
Yes. It typically has to do with not settling with mediocrity. And what we see in a lot of businesses is people get complacent. They allow their employees to perform at the lowest level possible. So the minimum necessary is not adequate in my world. I like the maximum possible. And when we go after the maximum possible, we set our standards high. We talk about high standards. We live those high standards. And we expect other people around us to come and meet us at those high standards. A lot of people in management and business will go down to the bottom feeders, the low players in their space, and they'll hang out with them thinking, I'm going to help this person do better. No, you're not. They want to help you do worse instead of you helping them do better. So ultimately, it comes down to stop settling. Stop settling for this minimum necessary stuff. Because if you let people in your business set the bar low, they will do everything they can to get underneath that and make it even lower. But if you live setting the bar high and you say, come on, follow me, let's get over this bar, you'll see a section of those people, and that's called employee engagement. You'll see them trying to get over the bar with you, and you've just raised your standards. Get rid of the bottom feeders, get rid of the people trying to get under the minimum necessary, and only hire those A players who want to perform at the top with you. That's where we start breaking down our business. Strangely enough, those high-performing businesses typically have a waiting list of employees who want to work there. So in franchising, I can ask everybody out there, I can't see you, but you can see me. Raise your hand if you have a problem with personnel, with getting, recruiting, keeping the right people. Everybody raises their hand. And then there's always a few who say, I got a waiting list. You go, why? Well, because I work on leadership every day and I set high expectations and accountability and I coach people to be the best that they can possibly be every single day. Those organizations have lower personnel costs. Personnel is like, one of our prime costs. It's like 30 to 35% of our expenses. So why do you want to have that be 45 or 55%? Because you always have people in training and you have twice the staff on that you need. Hire the right people, train them well, support them, lead them, and help them be leaders. And your training costs will go down, your prime costs will go down, your profit margins will go up.
It's funny, as you were sharing that, that piece of advice, I was thinking about, the Eisenhower matrix of like how you organize your week, and it's like urgent, not important, or urgent, not urgent, important, not important. Someone sent me one, gosh, I can't remember when this was, but it was an Eisenhower kind of 2x2 grid, but it was for the types of employees on your team. And it was, incredible work ethic, like works really hard, and then, doesn't work very hard. But the other grid was, God, like works thoughtfully and intelligently, and I don't know, it doesn't work thoughtfully and intelligently. And it was like the people that always sneak by under the radar a lot of the times that it's easy to overlook is the person who's working really hard, but they're not working thoughtfully. Like they're like, that is the worst employee you could have because they're doing all this activity and they're doing all these things. And at the surface, it looks like, oh, wow, this person's working so hard. They're here 12 hours a day and they're doing all this amazing, they're just doing work all the time. But you realize they're causing more chaos for the organization because they aren't slowing down and they aren't thinking thoughtfully about it. And when you had shared that, when you look for the right type of employee and the right characteristics, it jumped out at me. And I need to find that grid again because I couldn't remember the other axis. But it's not always the person working the hardest that necessarily is the best for the team. It's got to be the right combination of both.
Totally. It's funny you bring that up because Simon Sinek actually has a video out there called "Who's the Asshole?" And what he talks about in this is how do Navy SEALs pick good people for their team. And you have this XY axis, and you have on the X axis is hard work, and on the Y axis is trust, or it might be it's Y axis is hard work, X axis is trust. So those that are very high trust and very hard workers, everybody really loves because they're working for the team. Those that you might have somebody who's very trustworthy but is a mediocre worker, well, you can raise the standards on that person and help them get there. They're not as desirable, but for crying out loud, you can raise the standards on them and they're still trustworthy. But if you have low trust, of course, nobody wants the low trust, low performance person. That one's easy to get rid of. They're just the loser on the team. They're the C or D player, easy to notice and get rid of. But the hard one is the hard worker that nobody trusts. And that hard worker that nobody trusts is undermining people, but they're at such a high performance that people are like, oh, we can't get rid of them because they're selling more. They make the numbers. They're always here, things like that. Well, they're always infecting your company at a high level and a high velocity. So it's funny when you ask the entire team, who's the asshole on the team? They point to that person. And it's always the same person. So the reality is, even though they're a high performer, but they're low trust, or, nobody likes them, but they're a high performer, they don't belong there. You want high performers with high trust. And here's why we end up with either high performers, high trust, or high performers, low trust, is we don't set trust and those value standards when we talk to people. We always say, I want you to sell this much, but we don't want to say, I want you to sell this much and contribute to the team this way. We leave out the and contribute to the team this way part. So leadership is breaking down because there's no clarity about the values of the organization and the trust within it. We just talk about performance numbers. What do the numbers show? Which are lagging indicators to begin with. Leading indicators actually are this trust piece. I want you to work your butt off for everybody around you, for your brothers and sisters in the job, on the team. And I want you to perform at the highest level possible. That person, everybody likes because they want to be like that person and they're all going to work together well. So, the whole concept of who's the asshole fits right in with what you're saying. Got to get rid of that person. They're the cancer on the team.
Yeah, it's a good framework too, just a simple 2x2 grid or, simple axis to look at. And it's easy. You don't want to put people in a box necessarily all the time, but when you're, building a big team and things are moving fast, it's nice to have some of these shortcuts to think through, like, hey, who's really, the top performers, high trust, who's the top performer, hardworking but low trust person, et cetera, just to make that, kind of short pecking list and really understanding the team and the business in a better way. I think you kind of answered the next question I had, but that was, starting to shift back to conversations around, franchisees and, franchising as a whole. What kind of, mindset do you think a brand new franchisee should bring to the table in a brand?
I think they need to understand, regardless of the brand, that a brand new franchisee needs to do a couple things. And that is before they even open the doors. I heard this put best the other day. I was at a franchise event, and it was talked about where the brand will not let the franchisee open doors until they have 50 VIP customers lined up ready to go. 50. I mean, that's a lot. But and you're working, like, if you have brick and mortar, or even if you have chuck in a truck, a mobile concept, or whatever, you're working on building out your infrastructure. You're doing a ton of training. You're going to franchise headquarters and learning how franchisees operate and what all the employees need to do, all the different positions on the line, whatever that line might be for, things of that nature. You have a lot to do. Sales is an additional one. So a new franchisee needs to come to the table and say, I'm going to have revenue before I even need it. So how do you generate that revenue before you even need it? A lot of people are like, I'm going to wait until I open the doors. I don't want to shock my employees. I don't want to shock the system. So we're going to ease our way into this. Okay. If you have a lot of money and you want to burn some of it waiting on getting customers, then great. That's fine. But I'll tell you what, customers want to jump on a moving train. They want to see a business coming in and go, oh, wow, I want to be one of the first ones to adopt that because they've got my attention and I need what they have. Mm-hmm. So you've got to come in and, again, start with 50 VIP customers. Make those your first customers out there and make them want to be the best customers you've ever had. We've heard this concept of, 1,000 raving fans or 100 raving fans, or whatever it is. These are the beginning of your raving fans. And then the second thing is, this is going to take way more time and way more money than you expect. So have a pad of 30% or 50% on both of those things, because you're going to do something wrong. Something is going to go sideways. One of your suppliers is going to go, oh, we don't have that for another 6 months, or who knows what it is, but it's going to take more time and more money. So have the patience. Just already resolve yourself that I need to have a slush of extra money and extra time, and I'm willing to put those things into it. And if you come in under that, great, you're happy. Merry Christmas. I mean, for crying out loud, everything is going to be a little bit easier, but always expect it to be harder than what you read in the FDD, what you see in training, things like that. Because the people that are telling you about the FDD, the franchise agreement, and in training have done it, so they're better at it than you. So they're going to do it faster and cheaper than you can do it. So expect it to cost more and take more time. It's just, that's how business works. Nobody's trying to pull a fast one on you. It's just reality. And, you have the economy, you have, local market conditions. You might have a natural disaster, if you're trying to open something in the wintertime, it's a little more difficult because it's always the worst winter you've ever experienced. Who knows what it is? But the reality is it's going to take more time and more money, and start with 50 great customers.
That's great advice. I mean, when you were saying it's like building a house. It's going to cost you more and take longer than you think. And to your point, there are so many uncontrollables. It's easy for people to say, oh, I create my own luck. But there is an element of luck here and timing too. I mean, yes, you should create your own luck and you should control all the controllable pieces, but there are just so many factors, and some of them you aren't going to be able to control. And you've just got to do your best to be around the hoop and set yourself up best for contingencies and success. And to your point, having that buffer and just the expectation again in your mind that this is probably going to take a little longer, cost a little bit more, but I'm going to do everything in my power to, prevent that. But I'm going to be ready for if it does inevitably cost more and take a little bit longer.
Totally. And Alex, I want to add one more thing to this. And this one's going to shock a few people. This one might have a few people going, well, I don't agree with that. But the reality is, own the outcomes also. Franchisees, if something goes sideways, don't go blaming the franchisor. Okay? They're doing the best that they can to keep you operating within the system standards. There are too many variables for them to accommodate for. So just know, okay, it's going to happen. We're going to accept it. We're going to go, I learned something out of that. And you're going to move on. But stop blaming the franchisor for everything that happens in your world, because stuff happens in business. And once you get past that and you're not dwelling on trying to yell at somebody or send a nasty email in the middle of the night or text message going, why aren't they calling me back at 10 p.m.? I mean, for crying out loud, business happens. The big issues happen. They happen when nobody wants them to happen. They happen how nobody wants them to happen. But don't blame the franchisor. Ask the franchisor, can you help me with this? Mm-hmm. And I think if you have that teamwork together and not somebody attacking each other, because guess what? You're going to screw stuff up too. And the last thing you want is the franchisor attacking you. You want them approaching you with grace, just the same way you would approach them with grace. I think that will help you go a long way.
That is really, really, really good. I think underrated advice too. It's a relationship at the end of the day, and you got to be kind and understanding of one another. And I really like framing it as asking for help versus quick to point fingers and everything's chaotic and it's this person's fault or that person's fault. I really like that. I'm just more curious about this next question I have more than anything. I ask everyone some variation of this, but if you were personally buying one franchise today and not a whole, portfolio or hundreds of units or dozens of units, but, a 1 to 3 unit deal, not even a specific brand, but what kind of brand or like what sectors are you, most excited about, or what would you personally be interested in?
Well, I'll tell you, I love the growth factor in the QSR space. It's people have to eat 3 times a day. So if you can come up with a great tasting product and really a strong brand that people can connect with, I love the QSR space. Now, I know the margins are not as good, but I see a lot of profit levers that can maximize those margins. And I see some of our players really doing well throughout franchising. I'm not going to single out a brand because, you want to check something out, go look at the item 19 or talk to some franchisees. But I do love that space. I come from the real estate franchising space. I think that's changing. I like the real estate franchising space because it's kind of a hybrid service slash, some of it's remote, some of it is brick and mortar. I do like that space, but more than anything, I shouldn't say more than anything. I would compare this on the same level as QSR. I like the service brands because I think people want stuff done for them more so they can enjoy life more with their family. So, any of the service brands that do something that either gives you more enjoyment in life, such as, you can look at your yard and go, wow, look how beautiful that is, and enjoy it over the weekend instead of having to work on it all weekend. That's fantastic. Same thing with your house. The time we have with our families is precious. So anything that happens to our house or done for us that puts more time on our plates so that we can spend more of that enjoyment with our families, our kids, things like that. The older we get, the more precious we realize that time is with each other. So, and I think that's why, and obviously as you get more disposable income throughout life, you're going to subscribe more to those different service models. But I think the service model space is really, really strong. I know you guys have a lot of your portfolio is based on the service models. But I think that's a really good space also.
Yeah, and I don't know if you and I have talked about this yet, and I'll send it to you after, but have you read the AI 2027 article yet or have heard of this?
No, I haven't. I'd love to
I'll
see it.
I'll send it to you. It's a bunch of, kind of deep, senior researchers, data scientists, software engineers that have kind of, wrote this for their forecast of where they think AI is going. And they think by 2027 we'll have AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, meaning it can start to reason a little bit on its own versus just asking questions that we prompt it. And part of their forecast, it's not like, oh, doom and gloom, the world's going to end, but it's just, anything that's done on a computer, there is no way AI isn't going to be better at you than in the next 3 to 4 years. And so if you think about that and the ramifications of that is, do you need most lawyers anymore? Do you need consultants anymore? Do you need, entry-level analysts or bankers anymore? And so there's this whole wave of, I think, white-collar jobs that will be somewhat displaced. I'm not saying, 100% or anything, but there's going to be a pretty high number that has to go find something else to do. And I think what you just shared about home services brands or QSR brands and just the mission that you're on, the mission that we're on at Franzi of enabling operators, entrepreneurs, couldn't be more prevalent today with a better tailwind than I think there is now, where people are going to have to start entering this, bet on yourself economy and go run a home services brand because AI is not going to touch gutter cleaning or window cleaning or chicken sandwiches or whatever it may be. But so I agree with you. I think those two categories are phenomenally set up for success and just franchising and business ownership as a whole. I think with that, I got one last question. Where do you see franchising headed the next 5 to 10 years? And, what's next for you guys in Area 15?
Yeah, I think a lot of it plays off of the point you just made about the tech enablement and, the AI leverage in that. I think we're going to see how AI and tech enablement enters real strong into the franchise space. And I know you guys at Franzi are using it in order to help people better understand, where they fit in the franchising space. And kudos to you for that. I think you're doing a fantastic job with that. But ultimately, I think it's going to come down to, all right, how are we using it to better run our businesses? Because when you look at, ultimately, how do we increase the bottom line, the take home for a franchisee or an entrepreneur, it's going to come down to both, maximizing the customer purchase and the customer experience and adding customers to it. But it's also going to be, how do we manage the expenses of our business? You can only cut so much out of the business to maximize profitability without taking away from customer experience. So, the idea behind implementing the tech in it is going to be, where is that leverage within the business by adding the AI? And like, we have a 128-point inspection list on our stores for port of subs. AI is going to take a lot of that. You might be able to take a photo of things and have AI do the inspection in, a blink of an eye, as opposed to, 20, 30, 60 minutes, something like that. But ultimately, how do you do scheduling, your inventory, your ordering, maximizing people at the counter to best serve the customer. But you're right, AI is not going to make the sandwich. And AI is not going to talk to that customer who comes in to ask you to make the sandwich. And AI is not going to determine whether or not they want a brownie or a cookie. So, it's going to come down to great human beings doing great things, but it's going to be maximized by AI. And I agree with you. Gutter cleaning. I saw this thing for a gutter cleaning robot the other day. There's no way that thing would get the pine needles out of my gutters. I mean, it wouldn't work. It's going to have to be a person with a hand doing it. So, I think once we see the efficiencies created in it that way, and we understand the gaps, then we'll also be able to have, the multi-unit owners, people who come in and say, I want to own not just one port of subs, I want to own 5, instead of having this shared services model within their own small family office funding these things. A lot of that will be run by AI, the scheduling, the accounting, the forecasting, things of that nature. Instead of having 4 or 5 people, you might have one who's running the dashboard, but that's about it. And I think it's going to help us all expand all of our business operations overall. It's a great point. Those things will change, but you're right. Franchising right now, getting into it right now is a good idea, because as we start implementing and plugging in these different levers, those people that have already been operating for a little while are going to have an easier job of doing it than somebody who's new coming in.
Absolutely. Well, Adam, I really appreciate you taking the last hour to share your story, your experience, the advice, the feedback. It's been awesome talking to you. We didn't mention this, but you and I caught up earlier, the other week, and had a 30-minute call and ended up talking for 90 minutes. I mean, I could talk to you all day and jam with you on different ideas and things. So I appreciate you, sharing the time that you have again, and for all that you've done for the franchise community and all the franchisees and brands that you're supporting.
Hey, it's great to see you again, Alex. And thanks for your time the other day and also today. I just, like you, I love franchising and I love helping these people grow their businesses. And it's an honor to be in the same space as you.
If people want to connect with you at all, where can they do that?
They can find me at adamcontos.com. That's an easy way of doing it. Or also, I mentioned it before, but head on over to yourfranchisegroup.com and you can communicate with franchisees if you're a franchisee, or franchisors if you're a franchisor. If you're looking at getting into the space, just go over to adamcontos.com and you can reach out to me there, or adam@adamcontos.com.
Awesome. Thanks again for joining us, Adam.